I'm a mom to two kids who are currently 12 and 8. The pandemic definitely put us through some testing times with work, school, and lifestyle switching to 100% virtual. Initially, there were challenges as my 7-year-old first grader took time to adjust to virtual schooling. My work was very accommodating and allowed me to have a flexible schedule. I would start my day around 6:30 a.m. and take an hour off around 7:45 to ensure that the kids' attendance was marked and then help my first grader follow through with his classwork. With my fifth grader, she was more independent, and it was ensuring that the school notifications and emails were handled in a timely manner. My husband helped with their breakfast and lunch, and as required, we also got some tutoring help for my first grader. And later, towards the end of the day, I would again take some flexible time to settle them and help them with their day closing. We followed this schedule from March till June of 2020. The new school year has been much easier. The kids are settled in with their online learning, and the teachers have a set plan that has allowed for interactive teaching and learning.
What's up, y'all? My name is Andrew Defy, aka the Gorilla Poet Laureate, aka the Hoodie God, aka Spittin' Quarantino, aka I wear my sunglasses at night indoors because my eyes are as sensitive as my heart is, y'all. And we are back for another episode of the Masked Up Community Live Stream, the only live stream dedicated to medical exploration and equity through dialogue. And do we have a show for you tonight? We are handing over the mic to the teens. They are not just the future, y'all. They are the present too. Tonight, joining us on the show, we've got renowned activist Ethan Lindenberger, and we've got 15-year-old vaccine advocate Benjamin Kagan sitting down to talk to the one and only Allison Lee. And in tonight's The Racism Crisis segment, we are going to explore a study that says Black teens face discrimination an average of 5 times a day, y'all. Too often, we talk about the youth without talking to the youth. And tonight, our platform is theirs. Let's get started. So this is a place where a lot of people come to get their weekly updates on La Rona. So we'll get that out of the way real quick. And we're able to do it real quick right now because our numbers are below 1% test positivity, y'all. That's right. We are averaging about 2 cases per 100,000 people in California right now, which is incredible. So now, as June 15th looms on the horizon, we are all ready to take these masks off and start our post-pandemic lives. One of the ways Californians knew that COVID had really arrived and was going to change our way of life was Disneyland closing. I am happy to report that Disneyland is back open and even selling tickets to non-Californians right now, y'all. The other semi-exciting but still very weird news has been the incentive lottery for vaccinated Californians announced by Governor Newsom. The state will be giving away $116.5 million in a first-of-its-kind vaccine lottery. I don't know, y'all. A couple of weeks ago, the FDA authorized the Pfizer vaccine for emergency use in kids and teens aged 12 and up. NBC News spoke with some 12 to 15-year-olds to get their reaction on the news.
I think that if everybody can get the vaccine, then maybe COVID will be over sooner. So then we can go back to doing all those things that we can't do.
It's pretty exciting to know that I can get the vaccine really soon.
If everyone got it, everything would be better.
During the pandemic, I've been feeling a bit nervous, generally sadder than I used to.
At the beginning, really scared, really sad, I felt mostly scared, right? Because it was not just like the United States, it's not just Michigan, it's not just my community, it's the entire world, right? We're having a global pandemic.
As things seemed to escalate, it just got worse and worse. So then with that, I kept getting more nervous and being like, what is things going to be like? Like, when is things going to get back to normal? And then eventually it just got to the point where it was like, is it going to get back to normal?
The pandemic has affected my family a lot. Me and my brother are pretty much the only ones who haven't gotten COVID in my family. And my dad got hit really hard because he has rheumatoid arthritis. So it really affected his lungs, and he's still trying to recover. When my family got sick, it's just like, it hit me like, what do I need to do? And I just felt like I wasn't powerful enough to be able to change anything about it.
When I first heard that they were going to approve the vaccine, I was really excited.
When you're social distancing, you always got to think about it. But with a vaccine, it just works by itself, and I feel like it's going to cause a lot less stress and a lot more hopefulness.
I think that people who are scared of it have a valid reason of being scared of it, because it seems like everything's moving too fast.
Me, myself, I don't exactly believe in the vaccine, only because the vaccine came out in such a short amount of time.
I want to see how it can affect other kids before I just go and jump in and just get it myself. Just cautious. Anything that has to be injected into my body, I want to know everything about it before I get it.
Yeah, I am afraid of needles.
Yeah, I'm a little afraid of needles.
I hate needles like that. I just can't do it.
The sooner we all get it, the sooner everything will kind of return back to normal.
I have talked to my friends about the vaccine. We are all very excited to be able to have sleepovers.
Meet my friends, finally get to see them.
Last year I wasn't able to play baseball, but I'm starting again this year, which I'm really excited to do because I feel like I'm just getting another piece of myself back.
I think a lot of the hopefulness I'm feeling does come from the vaccine.
While we're talking to young people about how they feel about the vaccine, let's get into our first interview of the night. Ethan Lindenberger gained national attention when he got himself vaccinated on his 18th birthday against his mother's wishes. Ethan sat down with Masked Up's Allison Lee earlier this week to talk all things teens and vaccines.
Hello, Ethan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for coming on Masked Up, and thank you for all of the amazing work that you've been doing as an anti-vax advocate. And also, congrats on all of the incredible work and accomplishments you've achieved as of late, from being listed as a Time Next Generation leader to being able to testify in front of the U.S. Senate.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been a pretty wild ride, but I'm glad I could be here.
Awesome. So just jumping right in, while other teens may see turning 18 as an opportunity to get a driver's license or be able to finally vote, you saw it as an opportunity to finally get caught up on your vaccines. So why was getting vaccinated the first thing on your mind when you turned 18?
Yeah, so after I was of the legal age to consent to vaccines, where in Ohio it's 18, the reason that I pursued those vaccines and was really trying to get vaccinated was because I knew how important vaccines were. I did a lot of my own research and slowly discovered that vaccines aren't just a personal protective effort, they also protect your community. And my whole motivation to get vaccinated and pushing to have conversations with people in my life that didn't agree with vaccines came from the idea that if I don't get vaccinated, it puts other people at risk. And it's not a decision I can put off in good conscience.
Definitely. So you also mentioned in your Senate testimony that you were involved with debate in high school and how this kind of taught you the importance of pursuing credible information before coming to decisions for yourself. So what research led you to realize that vaccines are safe despite your mother's initial doubts?
Yeah. When I was in high school, I led a debate club and did a lot of the tutoring to some of my peers about how to do good research. And I kind of carry that over to the independent research I did on my own through vaccines. And really that started through just the curiosity of seeing a vocal community online that support vaccines. And that was a really weird dichotomy and difference I saw with my mom's beliefs. So in person at home, my mom's saying vaccines do this, so they cause autism. And online, I'm seeing a lot of people say the complete opposite thing, that vaccines save lives and are very, very important. And that research I did out of that curiosity was on very clear scientific sources, the CDC, the WHO, the Institute of Medicine, and trying to look at peer-reviewed studies, and also looking to see what designated and like accomplished scientists were saying, and officials, and across the board, it was just that vaccines were effective and safe, and the evidence was really overwhelming. And so that was the research I did and where I found it and kind of where it came from. I had solid conversations with my mom, but really all of the research was extremely scientific and all the conversations were very personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you were able to do research on your own and come to your own decisions. That's really inspiring and great to hear.
Yeah, it's something that, like, I think with the age of the internet is becoming more and more common. If you had to do scientific research a long time ago, you'd have to probably go to an official or a scientist or a doctor, ask them questions, go find, books at your library, and you can just go on your phone and find really clear scientific evidence very quickly. The problem, though, is with the internet, you also can try in good heart and good consciousness try and do research and then find bad evidence and bad research. So it's definitely, I think, important to say that I did my own research, but it's good to emphasize that it was scientific research. It wasn't just research, that I was validating my own beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That's super important. So did you have any initial doubts of your own about vaccines when you were younger before you decided to get them, especially, growing up with a parent who was anti-vax?
I didn't have any personal doubts around vaccines because I didn't understand how important vaccines were. Growing up, the conversation around vaccines with my mom was pretty short. It usually just went like, I'm glad I don't vaccinate you guys because vaccines are so dangerous and they kill people. And, when we're like 8, we're just thinking like, okay, that's cool. I don't want to die. And that was really all the conversation was. And there was no intentional education on and misinformation on why vaccines are dangerous. It was just like this idea that my mom would passingly throw out there. And when people would say, oh, you're not vaccinated, I'd go, no, my mom doesn't believe in vaccines. And they'd go, that's weird. I mean, vaccines are pretty inconvenient and they hurt your arm. And I go, yeah, that doesn't sound like fun. It was never a passionate issue to me. And once I did my own research and was starting to uncover why vaccines were so important, why people were vocally supporting them so fervently, that's when I started to actually have my own thoughts, where I was like, okay, I think my opinion on this is that vaccines seem really important and really, really safe and effective to prevent lots of deaths, which is something I never heard before. If my mom's just telling us that vaccines kill people and they're dangerous and blah, 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 she's never going to say, but some people think that vaccines save lives. That was never an idea that I came across until I did my own research.
Interesting. So speaking of this whole anti-vax debate, what strategies have you found effective or not effective in changing the minds of people with anti-vax beliefs?
I think changing the beliefs of the anti-vaccine community is extremely difficult because we're looking at a small margin of the population that is super deeply rooted in misinformation. And they have a conspiratorial mindset that makes them not believe or trust the traditional sources and avenues of facts and truth. Someone that believes in conspiracy theories as deeply as my mom does, who is very anti-vaccine, she will not look at the CDC as a reliable source. She will not look at the WHO as a reliable source. She won't look at scientific evidence as reliable sources. And because of that, it's hard to have any kind of debate because everything you're saying is out of this ill-fated attempt to misinform or sway her. And all the evidence is just not reliable. And that's a very intentional method of misinforming people. It's not just believe this, it's don't believe any of that. And when you're debating or having conversations or trying to change people's minds within that worldview, it's near impossible. So what I've seen is more effective is trying to be empathetic and kind and try and just maintain the facts, maintain your beliefs, but never push to change people's minds because that really causes divides to be sown. And when people slowly start to see changes in their life or someone close to them gets hurt from a preventable disease, that's more of the traumatic reasons that the anti-vaccine crowd comes out of their belief structures. And sometimes on the rare occasion, someone that they love and trust, that they believe is a good person, when they start disagreeing with them, it's like, okay, I'm a little more inclined to believe you. And so you have to build that relationship first. And that's when you can start having that conversation if you're really trying to change someone's mind. I'd also say, side note with that, trying to change anti-vaccine individuals' minds and what they believe, I feel like it's very hard, and I don't think is as effective as changing the beliefs of those that are hesitant. Because when people are hesitant and skipping and delaying some vaccines, it's still just as important to have that conversation with them as it is with the people who believe that vaccines are very dangerous. And so the hesitant community is also much larger. We have a lot more people that are hesitant to get every vaccine they should and follow the proper schedule. And we communicate to those people that they should get vaccinated completely. That's going to be more important to reaching herd immunity. So pragmatically, don't talk to anti-vaxxers. Focus on the hesitant. Realistically, if you have a relationship with someone, that's where most change can occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how you mentioned coming from a place of empathy, especially when talking to people with anti-vax beliefs. So that kind of segues perfectly into my next question. So you've often mentioned that despite the fact that you disagree with your mom, you know that she's coming from a place of love in terms of her concerns. So how has having an anti-vax parent shape your views on anti-vax groups as a whole? And do you think it has made you more understanding of people with these beliefs?
That's a good question. So I think that the relationship with my mom specifically is not indicative of most people, because when we're looking at the anti-vaccine crowd completely in whole, there's a different kind of relationship I have to the entire community than I have with my mother. And if I transition the views I have on my mom to the entire community of the anti-vaccine world, that's going to kind of lead to some bias and some projections from a personal relationship contorting my view of a scientific and social issue. It's kind of like talking to anyone who's like liberal or Republican or Democrat. If you take that person and make them everyone in that community, you're going to kind of form a bias and you're going to form some judgments and prejudice. And so for my mom, I've seen that she was coming from a place of love and care, trying to take care of her children. So that definitely impacted me. But I think that my view of the anti-vaccine community through that has established that people are misinformed and not malicious, and that there's others that are intentionally misleading them to get money or profit off of that misinformation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So why do you think that anti-vax beliefs and misinformation have become so prevalent as of late?
I think statistically we see a rise in hesitancy in different communities, and we can see different reasons for different demographics. And when you try and extrapolate what the reason is that people grow in hesitancy, you have to look at how hesitancy and conspiracy theories grow in the first place. And usually that happens because of disenfranchisement. Most people become conspiratorial, or they don't believe in science, or they don't trust the government when they feel like they've been mistreated or neglected. And I think that that is very clear with many people that are very vocal in the anti-vaccine community. Some people that their children died and they were diagnosed and like postmortem with SIDS. And SIDS is a very tragic, kind of confusing diagnostic to get when your child dies and they say you had sudden infant death syndrome. And it's really hard to explain what that is. And parents go, well, I need the answers. And so I'm going to find them. And then they start connecting the dots where they don't really exist. And we see people that are in low financial or poverty and like that kind of situation. And they feel like the government isn't taking care of them. And then their doctor's neglecting them, or they can't get good health insurance. And why would they trust the medical field if they're not really being taken care of in the first place? Beyond that, too, if you even look at financial disenfranchisement, like more deeply just in general, we see in like third world countries when we're trying to reach people in deep poverty with vaccines, that people in third world countries aren't super interested in getting vaccinated because they don't have clean water. They don't have food or proper housing or healthcare. So if they're not meeting their basic needs, why do they care about vaccines? And so when we look at people like Gen Z, the youngest generation right now, like my generation has some growing rates of hesitancy. And I personally believe the reason is similar to the reason we see hesitancy in third world countries, is because we see people today, and my age specifically, and millennials as well, that we have the highest cost of education, the highest cost of real estate and property, the lowest and national like national minimum wage is like $7.25, and so we see a really low income, a really high cost of living, a really high cost of education, and it's hard to make ends meet. And so if people are struggling to survive and struggling, they're always working and they're constantly at their job and they're depressed and they can't get good healthcare therapy, they're not going to care about vaccines. So there's a lot of ways that we see that happening, and it's hard to address it all without looking at demographics, looking at the larger reasons why. And even for Ohio, we had the lottery for vaccinated Ohio citizens, and the lottery was like $1 million, and you also could get free college if you were like 18 or below. And that saw a huge spike in vaccinated young adults my age. It was like a 94% increase. And I think the reason is because that like lottery was like, hey, you know how you guys don't have money and college is super expensive? What if you get vaccinated and we can maybe get you out of that? Then everyone's like, yes, please. That's what we're concerned about. They don't care about the vaccine. They're concerned about getting to college and having a career, having money because they're destitute. And it's tough because answers like that only put the Band-Aid on the larger wound, which is the social and economic issue that causes people to be hesitant in the first place. And you can get into the conversation around social media as well, but I think that's the larger reason.
Interesting. Yeah. Especially hearing about that lottery with offering free college as a college student myself. That is something that would definitely be alluring. Yeah.
Right.
As someone is Gen Z.
It's very frustrating too, because like I've seen a lot of individuals, like I talked to Fox News about this, and one of their questions that the journalist and the anchor asked me was like, do you think that young people are just like lazy and free money appeals to them and that they had to make a lottery to get people vaccinated? And I was like, no, I think that objectively, factually, and statistically, we have the highest cost of education and like a really low minimum wage nationally. And in Ohio, it's like $8.50. So it's a little better, but that's like $1 more than average national minimum wage. And still not livable in any regard. And I was like, I don't think it's laziness. I think it's a socioeconomic issue that's causing people to be neglecting like their own personal health and safety. I mean, I guarantee if you look at statistics for young individuals, young adults, that they're not having children. That I know that statistically they're not having children, not getting married as often. And statistically, we're seeing that people aren't going to the doctors as often, or like people are driving themselves to the hospital. And those are socioeconomic issues that influence their healthcare decisions. And so the two are most certainly related. And when people want to just say, oh, they're lazy, they're missing that entire conversation. It's very frustrating, like, yes, free college sounds great, but vaccinated people do as well. And so we have to address both at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. I love how you shift the conversation from not blaming individuals who may have anti-vax or vaccine hesitancy beliefs, but instead drawing attention to like these larger systemic issues that we're facing. I think that's really important to also consider in terms of what the root cause is for these beliefs.
I think that's easy to just throw away the conversation and just kind of chop it up to laziness or ill intent or stupidity. But then when you look at statistics and you look at the scientific research behind the way that these beliefs come about and the larger issues, it's just all just facts and science. Like I'm not speaking out of a lot of anecdotes or personal judgment. This is statistics. And so that's a good thing to consider when you're talking to people. If they're saying things and saying like, oh, people are lazy or oh, people are dumb or, the CDC's out to get you, like, politically or medically or in a conspiracy way. I mean, those are all just personal judgments being put on the conversation. And when you hear people giving a lot of citations and facts and science and statistics and, talking about actual numbers, and that's where real change can happen. And yes, you want to remain empathetic, but you also want to address the actual issues, and you need to look at the science to find the actual problem.
Yeah, definitely. So additionally, for all of the kids out there who are dealing with the same situation of wanting to get vaccinated, but having parents who disagree, what advice can you give?
I think for people that have anti-vaccine parents that are trying to get vaccinated or they're not of the legal age of consent and they're dealing with that family structure and that conversation within their household, it's important to remain empathetic and have that conversation in a kind and understanding, patient way. But beyond that, it's also important to understand that when you are, let's say 16, in Ohio, you can't get vaccinated without your parents' consent. it's important to know that when you turn 18, you can make that decision legally. But in terms of your actual household and the implications and consequences of going against your parents, they might not be very understanding. And I've had a lot of people reach out and say, hey, I'm 22. I'm well over the age of consent. I'm still not vaccinated. I know that, and it freaks me out. But I know that because I'm living at home and I can't afford college, if I go get vaccinated and my parents kick me out, I won't be able to finish my degree. And that's a really heart-wrenching thing to hear, but it's something that happens. And that individual, if you're in the situation, has to weigh the decision between getting vaccinated and protecting themselves and their community, or putting themselves at risk to get a disease and taking care of themselves in a different sense, economically, socially, with their house. You could get vaccinated, but you also could become homeless. And you don't really want that. We don't want that for you. The scientific community and doctors and healthcare professionals don't want you to be homeless and get vaccinated at any cost. The vaccines are one aspect of the overall goal of medicine, which is the best quality of life. And your quality of life is going to go down very dramatically if you have to couch surf and you can't pay for college. And if you can just wait a few more years before you finish your degree and move out, then get your vaccines, maybe do that. If you can have that conversation with your parents, that's the best option to get them to understand and maybe agree or disagree. But if that can't happen, then just be patient and know that when you have the ability to get vaccinated, please pursue that. Like for me, my parents are divorced. And so I went to my dad and said, hey, you seem to be less passionate about this issue. Can I go get vaccinated? He's like, I don't care. My mom was very adamantly like, I don't want you to do this. And so I had to think critically about the decision I was making and not just say, screw you, I'm 18, I can do what I want. That kind of mindset's going to cause some deep familial damage, and you want to be careful about that.
Yes, that's definitely some really great advice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's also coming from like people that have reached out. Like I've had dozens of people reach out on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or Reddit, and they said like, I'm in a similar situation and I'm not sure what to do. And my boyfriend is anti-vaccine, or his parents are anti-vaccine. I'm trying to convince him. There's a lot of people having that conversation, and fundamentally, if you believe vaccines are important, you want to get vaccinated. That does not stop or remove the barrier of your parents' or authority figures' beliefs. And you can't just ignore that regardless of how old you are. And that conversation is missed very often, especially by medical professionals, because we're so often talking about the legal guidelines and when people should be able to get vaccinated, like the legal age of consent being lowered. But no matter how old it is, people still have to deal with that family structure. Even if it's 14, that's a really young age to be able to go get vaccinated without your parents' consent. Even if it's 20, it still does not remove the fact that your parents are still going to be very frustrated if they're anti-vaxxers. And we have to talk to that and say that if you are a young person pursuing those vaccines, regardless of that family structure, then congratulations and we're proud of you. Like, please take care of yourself, and you're doing the right thing to try and pursue those vaccines. Like, encouragement is missing in that conversation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. So also, from one student to another, how have you managed to balance life as a student with also being a prominent vaccine advocate?
That's actually the first time I've asked that question. And ironically, kind of not, I think, to be completely honest. When I was traveling and doing the majority of my larger advocacy around my testimony, and I was still in high school, and I was traveling like nationally to go to different conferences and do a lot of really important advocacy work, I was still in my senior year and finishing school. And so often I would go to California or New York, and I would have to bring a week's worth of homework with me, and in the hotel room at night, stay up till 2 a.m, do my homework, wake up at 6 to go to an interview. And that was extremely overwhelming. And I think that I say that and point that out because in my experience, there was a lot of people that said like, oh, young advocate, that's so cool. Like, we're so proud of you. That's awesome. Without really paying attention to the fact that young advocate is not a term we really want to hear. We don't want young people to have to focus on social, economic, and medical issues and having to voice their opinions and the advocacy that they want to see, because they're dealing with their life. I was only 18. I was barely an adult. And why was I head and leading and charging the discussion around a medical issue that I was really not qualified to lead? I was speaking out of anecdotes in my personal story, so I wasn't speaking out of line, but I wanted to be back home dealing with prom and trying to get a girlfriend and trying to finish school. Like, those were my real concerns I should have been focusing on. And instead, I was in a political and social issue that was very overwhelming. And to me, it was kind of like I just have to do it kind of thing. I just have to keep going. And this is too important to ignore, because if even one person gets vaccinated through my advocacy, that person's life could have been saved, or a disease that could have killed them may have been prevented now. And so it was such an important issue that I just kept pulling myself up on my bootstraps, basically, and just really just taking all the damage and just trying to brush it off. And when I went to college, I had to take a gap year from school to continue advocating. And so a lot of it was just pushing off responsibilities that were still very important. And I think people that want to get into advocacy as a young person, that's great. But it's also kind of like, be careful what you wish for. Because if you get into a high level of advocacy, kind of what I do, it's a lot. It's a lot of weight on your shoulders to really try and do that so often, especially with other responsibilities, be it school, relationships, a home structure, family, friends. And balancing that is near impossible as a young person. If you're an adult well into your career and you have a well-established job and family, and you can work around that to go places and do what you want advocacy-wise, that's very different than being bombarded with schoolwork and then trying to figure out how to handle that, trying to learn who you are as a person because you're only a teenager. And on top of that, leading a social issue and like trying to like facilitate that discussion. I don't think anyone could do that without being slightly overwhelmed. And for me, it was really hard. And so I just say that to be completely honest, and to also say that like young people, as passionate as they are, really shouldn't have to have that discussion and lead those movements. And like, we shouldn't see young people leading the national discussion around gun control or climate change or vaccines. Like, those are adult political, socioeconomic issues that need to be addressed by professionals. And if they fail and the young generation has to step up, that's not a good thing. That's a failure on the system.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Thank you so much for sharing, and it's really inspiring to hear how you've been able to work and try to balance all of these responsibilities. And I agree that I think it really does show a failure of our system that so many young people and Gen Z have to kind of step up and lead these conversations. But thank you again for really taking on that role.
Yeah, I think that it's something that like I very much fell into on accident. Like, I had a viral post online that kind of spearheaded something that really just kind of domino effect just happened. And I'm really glad I'm in that position still, but it's something that there were certainly some days where it was very overwhelming, especially with vaccines. We look at how the anti-vaccine movement can be very cruel sometimes. And it wasn't uncommon to post something to Facebook and within an hour have 10,000 people telling me to kill myself. And if people are like, yes, like, young advocate, that's so, I'm proud of you, good job, it ignores the fact that like there are responsibilities and consequences to being a part of a social issue and movement. Like, it's not just flowers and roses and awards. I mean, it's very much a lot of dialogue and conversations with people that do not care and trying to raise awareness, and people telling you that you should not be doing it and being very mean about it. So you have to balance that as much as possible, but those are consequences, and those are things that are going to happen regardless of how much effort you put in. No matter what, that will happen, and it's not fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so final question. This is something we ask all of our guests on our show. Despite all of the hard work you've been doing as of late, and also, as you mentioned, social media hate, things like that, where are you finding your joy today?
These are great questions. So for me, to find my joy amongst the world of the advocacy that I do, being in college, balancing that with the relationship and friends and everything, I really try and remove that connective tissue between myself and social media, because social media can be very, very negative in your self-perception and disillusion you from spending time in places that really matters. And so despite social media being the cornerstone of my advocacy, I resent it. And so You'll see that on my Twitter, my Instagram, my Facebook. I'm very inactive, and there are large spans of time where I'm not doing anything, and it's very intentional because I spend my time reading, using those quiet moments to go outside, rock climb. I'm very athletic in rock climbing, and so I really try and remove myself from that demanding world of advocacy and social change when I can, as often as possible. Because the moment I sit down and start doing interviews and get caught up in that, it's just go, 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 go. And it's a very sad thing to do because people are dying. And when social focus is not put on vaccines, look at COVID-19, we see a lot of people die needlessly. And that's important to say because if you don't say it, no one will really understand. But that's extremely stressful. And so to find my joy, I have to remove myself. And that's been really great because I have a bookshelf over here that I'm digging into. I mean, I go and rock climb and I don't talk about my advocacy. I have friends that care about me regardless of the social work I do with vaccines. And I don't get caught up in social media. I really think that's the big thing. So I have hobbies. I have a social life, but those are like the steps I take to make sure that I am not becoming unhappy within this world.
I see. Well, thank you so much, Ethan. It's been a pleasure to hear about all of your amazing work and your experiences. And thank you again for all that you've done in terms of fighting vaccine misinformation and just helping to work and keep our community safe. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm glad I can be here and have this conversation.
Look, we all know racism is a public health crisis, but how does that health crisis affect teens? A 2020 study from the Journal of Applied Developmental Psychology asked that question and followed 101 Black teens from the Washington, D.C. area to find out. And no surprise to anyone, it turns out Black teens face an average of at least 5 incidents of discrimination a day. Here's a report from WUSA 9 CBS in D.C.
This week, we're talking about the negative effects racial discrimination is having on our young people. Our Michael Quander is asking the tough questions and discussing how we can start finding solutions.
Racial discrimination, it's nothing new. We all know what happens. But one study followed a group of teenagers from right here in D.C. It found that Black teens face racial discrimination on average 5 times a day. That's 5 times. And the effect may cut deeper than you think.
My name is Devin English. I'm an assistant professor at the Rutgers School of Public Health.
What were you all looking for when you all first set out to do this study?
What we were interested in, first and foremost, was being able to measure how often racial discrimination was happening. In this study, we measured racial discrimination on a daily basis on 101 Black adolescents from 4 schools in Washington, D.C.
Why did you all pick children from D.C. For this study?
Because of my experiences growing up in the DMV, seeing racial discrimination in my environment when I was growing up, it seemed like a really important thing to do right at home.
So talk to me about what you all found.
Black adolescents are experiencing racial discrimination on average 5 times per day in many different ways. And these daily experiences of racial discrimination are leading to increases in symptoms of depression over a 2-week period.
One of the biggest reactions that I've seen to the articles that have come out about this is that people say, this is something that we know. We know that Black people face a discrimination higher than other races.
To be honest, this research isn't surprising. And we think that is part of the power of the research. It supports what researchers and Black activists have been saying for a long time. Anti-Black racism is a part of daily life for Black youth. This is really a part of a body of evidence that shows that racial discrimination should be treated as a public health emergency.
In what ways can those conversations start to happen?
And I believe that it is on white community members in DC to call out racism and to actively practice anti-racism.
Definitely important work that you're doing and an important conversation this research is hopefully starting. Here we have Devin English from the Rutgers School of Public Health. Thanks.
thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for the work you're doing.
We have been highlighting some amazing health and wellness work being done by young people this episode, so it only seems right that we wrap with another Allison Lee interview. This time, she sits down with young Benjamin Kagan, who's been part of an incredible movement of young folks working to help elders find and schedule vaccine appointments in the Chicago area. Benjamin is only 15 and already being the change he wants to see in the world.
Benjamin Kagan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. First of all, thank you so much for all of the incredible work you've been doing these past few months with the Chicago Vaccine Angels. We're so excited to be here with the Chicago Vaccine Angel himself, and we're just super excited to hear everything you have to say about all of the work you've been doing as of late, booking appointments for seniors in terms of getting COVID-19 vaccines. So just jumping right into it, you're a freshman in high school as of now, and I can imagine you've probably been super busy, not only balancing schoolwork, but also having to stay up late to book COVID-19 vaccine appointments for seniors. So what motivated you to do this work and continue doing this work despite managing school at the same time?
You know, that's a really thoughtful question. I appreciate that. Reading some of the stories of these people that I've been helping is really what continues to push me to keep going. You know, these stories, I'll reiterate, I mean, these stories are just horrendously bad. You know, they're all in horrible situations, and then to be able to give them their vaccine and then they can, you know, get that sense of normalcy back and go back to seeing their family and living their lives. That's what keeps me going. And, you know, that feeling that you get from helping someone like that just feels incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing. And it's really been important to help people get vaccines so we can all return to normal. I know that's something that is really important to all of us. So, you know, after booking so many appointments for seniors, what changes do you think we should be making to these systems to make it easier to book vaccine appointments?
You know, as you're aware of, demand recently has gone way down. So there is not that constant rush of having to be right there when appointments get opened up. But I do think that the opening up of more walk-in sites is definitely a good thing. I know that, you know, my local Julasco is open to walk-ins. I know that Walgreens and CVS and all the county and all the city sites have opened up to walk-ins. And really, I think that's good. You know, I also think that this new hyper-local focus where there's a lot of pop-up events going on with, you know, faith leaders and different communities, you know, through schools, you know, I think that is definitely the best way to get the vaccine to everybody that needs it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you mentioned that demand for vaccines has been going down. So what does the future look like for your organization, Chicago Vaccine Angels? Are you guys still scheduling a lot of appointments for seniors, or are you starting to shift to other goals?
So we have not been scheduling very many appointments for seniors to go to CVS. But what we have been doing lately is working with our different medical providers to provide homebound vaccinations to people that need it, because that's a program that has been, you know, incredibly slow due to the cold chain storage required with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. And some seniors don't want Johnson & Johnson due to the fear of blood clots. So we're still working on that, but we are not totally sure what the future holds. You know, there may be booster shots coming eventually, and we just want to be ready for that. And we are going to, you know, keep fighting and helping people that need their vaccines.
Amazing, amazing. So in addition to, you know, the difficulties we've seen in the past of getting people vaccines, another barrier we've been seeing is the spread of vaccine hesitancy and misinformation. So what do you think that our generation can be doing to overcome these barriers and prevent the spread of more vaccine misinformation in the future?
You know, I think that posting it on your Snapchat story or posting it on Instagram, that does a lot. You know, that shows people, hey, I got my vaccine, you can do it too. You know, it doesn't hurt, it's fine, go get it. Yeah, you know, just encouraging people to do it and encouraging people to get the vaccine through social media is definitely one big thing, but also talking to your friends, telling them, I got my shot. You know, we can stop wearing masks if we get the vaccine. One of the biggest things that is now starting to play a role is encouraging people to get the vaccine so they can go to concerts. I know that I'm super excited to go to Lollapalooza later this year, and there's going to be, no masks because the concert is, it's forcing either a vaccination or a test every single day. And the more common sense of the two is obviously a vaccination, considering, that it's free and the whole deal there. But, I think that is definitely a good incentive to get people vaccinated.
Yes, definitely. I agree. Especially, for us Gen Zers, using social media is a great way to help encourage other people to get vaccinated. Also, concerts. I'm super excited to go to BTS concerts when everything opens back up. So yeah, that's amazing. So just a few weeks ago, the FDA announced that teens between 12 and 15 are now eligible for the Pfizer vaccine. So I know you were doing a lot of work helping seniors get vaccines when you weren't eligible yourself, but have you been able to get a shot since?
Yes, I have. My second dose is actually coming up next week. The day that the CDC came out with the guidance on that Wednesday, I thankfully called my friends at the Cook County Health Department, and they got me right in that night.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear it.
Thank you.
So, additionally, what message do you have for other teens out there who might be hesitant about getting vaccinated, especially since this news about Pfizer being eligible for them has just opened back up?
Yeah, I would say get your shot and you can have a normal summer. That's the thing that I'm looking forward to the most. I'm going to go off to summer camp, and pending that new CDC guidance, summer camp is going to be pretty normal, and my entire summer is going to be pretty normal, and masks are not going to be required in the vast majority of places. So get your shot and you can take that mask off and you can really get back to having a normal life. And hopefully next year at school, there's going to be no masks, there's going to be no distancing, and we're going to be back to having a normal, fun school year that, is pre-pandemic.
Yes, definitely. So last question, this is something that we ask all of our interviewees. Aside from all of the amazing work you've been doing, where are you finding your joy today?
Yeah, I really enjoy playing soccer and playing baseball. That's what I love to do. And when I'm not booking vaccines or talking to healthcare providers about doing in-home stuff, I definitely would say, playing soccer and playing baseball are two things that cause me the most joy.
Amazing, amazing. Benjamin, thank you so much for all of the work you've been doing. It's been a pleasure to speak to you about all of your hard work. And thank you so much for being such an inspiration to so many other teens out there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That brings us to the end of another episode of Masked Up, and we want to thank the half of the internet that tunes in every week, especially you. I'm Andrew Defy. As always, shout out and big thanks to Netta, Allison, and the rest of the Masked Up show crew. Like Mozzie said, health is wealth, and I need my bag. Remember, covered faces don't get cases, and health doesn't come from a pharmacy, y'all. Till next time.